Son, you've got to be twice as good to get half as far. That's something I heard a lot growing up from my father, who is right there tonight. And it's not just him who said this, and it's not just me who's heard this, but this is a familiar axiom often passed from black parent to black child, each word laced with an enduring understanding of what it takes to combat society's script of black inferiority. This phrase, passed from generation to generation, replicated throughout the Black American experience like a mutated gene, provides accelerant when we're on the brink of success, and serves as our salve when said success proves elusive. Now, take a moment and imagine what it might look like for an entire educational institution, not just a family, to internalize this message, to facilitate extreme upward mobility through educational attainment, ultimately surpassing this well-known maxim. Well, in fact, there exist a number of such programs. They work to alter students' paths by preparing to meet them at a critical point in their educational journeys, in middle school, where paths so exponentially diverge. They alter students' paths by preparing them to leave their public school system and enter the world of elite private boarding and day schools, much like the ones that you see here. In studying one of these programs that I refer to as Uplift Academy, I ask questions that help us understand the intended and unintended consequences of our attempts to redress societal inequality. Uplift Academy is a nonprofit organization that works each year to launch a cohort of 14 and 15-year-old Black and brown students to and through elite independent educational institutions. In studying Uplift, I ask, what are the costs borne by Uplift students on their journeys of upward mobility? I'm a scholar of education, and I use sociological and ethical tools to help us understand these attempts to redress societal inequality through the diversification of elite spaces, much like this one. To answer my questions, I took a year to conduct hundreds of hours of observations and over 100 interviews of members of the Uplift community. My findings are a bit complicated, but I'd like to share a snapshot of them with you here today. I've found that Uplift students experience what I term an arc of ethical injury, a process whereby they feel their racial identities are recognized and then stripped down and then monumented for institutional gain. Being twice as good might get them in the door, but then what happens? Once at their schools, students gain access to educational and social privilege that they could not have otherwise dreamed of, and they even serve as faces of diversity on campus. But what is a face without its features? What are the invisible burdens that these students bear? Upon arriving at Uplift, students experience a fullness of color and self through congregation with those of shared background and shared academic aspiration. One alum said, it was very easy to work hard when you were surrounded by people who were working as hard as you, looked like you, from the same backgrounds as you. Paradoxically, it is also during this time that students' identities were first stripped as a result of exposure to the elements of white upper-class society. Their speech was corrected, their hobbies and interests called into question, and their families distanced at times. One alum said that Uplift was essentially stripping away your blackness, while another said that through things like etiquette classes, Uplift was assimilating us into the places we were going to go into. However, rather than prepare them, this exposure merely weathered them, reminding them of just how different they were. Once at their campuses, this stripping made students suitable monuments of diversity to be upheld as stories of successful integration. One student shared an instance of a photographer capturing a moment of her and her diverse friend group, saying, it's just like, oh, you'll publish us on your website to show, oh, it's so diverse, look at everything we're doing. Meanwhile, we're having all these problems. Despite the pedestal that they've been placed on, students often felt isolated from campus life. And much like these statues right here today, they adorn high school campuses, without being able to move freely. And even in instances where students felt they were respected leaders on campus, they said that it sometimes felt like they had to continually earn their place. One student shared, if I stop doing the things at my school that I usually do, like being a leader, I always feel like the school's gonna look at me like, oh, we're not getting our money's worth anymore. Twice as good indeed has a look, and it's one that can be objectified for institutional gain. However, wherever there is oppression, there is resistance. And this arc of ethical injury is no exception. In the face of these processes, students find ways to reclaim and develop their identities, especially as it pertains to race, ethnicity, and culture. One alum shared this sentiment saying, it wasn't until I got to adulthood and I went to college and I majored in Africana studies and sociology that I could process what I'd been through, which changed my entire worldview. And another alum shared that at Uplift, it was like, what does it mean to be you in white spaces? I had to, especially after college and during the pandemic when I was by myself alone, really reflect on what it means just to be me. And perhaps there are ways to confer new kinds of capital to students beyond human, social, and cultural to prepare them for environments that are primed to weather and monument them. One Uplift alum shared this sentiment stating, I get what Uplift was doing and why they did it because that's sort of what we needed to succeed in the environments that we went into. But those tools weren't even enough. What would have been better is to affirm us in who we are, because who we are shouldn't have to change. So, if being twice as good isn't enough, and getting half as far certainly isn't either, then where does that leave us? Well, for one, I argue that we must debunk the myths that these mobility journeys are not injurious to those who take them. And two, our focus must be to change elite settings, to fundamentally incorporate marginalized populations into every fiber of the institution. Doing so is by no means a social cure, but it does have the power to allow educational experiences to transform students into their fullest color, that they might bring us closer to the society that we all so desperately need. Thank you.